Tom worked diligently on fresh test data, a monotonous and lengthy task that was crucial to his team's recent efforts on the test car. Despite his lack of enthusiasm, he diligently organized the information for analysis. His phone chimed with a text alert. Glancing at the screen, he momentarily ignored the sender's identity. Only after a lull in his data work did he glance up from his monitor, retrieving his phone to inspect the message. It hailed from an unregistered number, though local in area code, unfamiliar to him. Initially deeming it potential spam, he reconsidered, opting to open it in case it originated from a team member whose contact he hadn't yet saved. Clicking on the message revealed an unexpected sight, a carnally explicit photo. Bewildered, he read the accompanying message. "Pay close attention. You still have time at Bradley's 18. Ouch!" He reviewed the message once more. Pausing for a moment, he then let out a slight chuckle. It wasn't common for them to receive misdirected solicitations, and he was about to discard the message when he glanced at the image once more, causing his heart to skip a beat. Initially unnoticed on her left leg, so minuscule it was nearly imperceptible, was a tiny mole belonging to Alice, his wife of 6 years. Staring at her in disbelief, he desperately sought something to refute what he had witnessed firsthand. Yet the more he scrutinized, the more convinced he became that he was indeed beholding a damning photograph of his spouse. Rereading the message, he puzzled over its significance. Bradley's was a local pub, but not one frequented by Alice. He was in the neighboring town, so why Bradley's? At 6 in the evening, while Alice should have been en route to Boston, her team was gearing up for a significant proposal. The presentation loomed for Monday afternoon. The entire team had flown in today, slated to convene tomorrow for final proposal touches, and on Sunday for a comprehensive rehearsal before the actual event. As one of the leaders, Alice's presence was essential for preparation. It was currently 5:15 p.m. Her arrival in Boston was scheduled for 4:30. Normally, she'd check in upon landing, but it seemed plausible she was occupied assembling the team and their gear en route to the hotel. He contemplated phoning, but opted to address the message first. Nothing original, but entirely expected. "Who is this, and where did you get this photo?" he typed out. "Should I meet you at Bradley's?" Packing his belongings for the day, he resolved to head to Bradley's for answers. He needed to hear from Alice about the flight, so he sent her a casual, "How did the flight go? I'm grabbing a bite. Call me when you're free." He planned to maintain a low profile and unravel the situation. As he strolled to his car, his phone beeped again. "Alice," he presumed, unlocking his phone, but the message came from the mysterious sender. "I'll be there, but I'm sure you'll find someone more interesting than me." His head reeled. Quickly, he launched the Maps app on his phone and hastened to his car. It took him 30 minutes to reach Bradley's, and it was now 5:40 p.m. He would arrive shortly after 6 o'clock. Unaware of the urgency, he planned to head straight there, hoping to make it in time for whoever the sender of the message thought would interest him. En route, his phone rang again. This time it was Alice, mentioning the hectic time with her team. "I'll call you later before bed. Love you." He didn't think much of it. Their conversation could wait. His focus was on the meeting at Bradley's and how the sender obtained such personal information about his wife. His heart raced as he pulled into the parking lot at 6:12 p.m. The sender hadn't hinted at whom he was seeking, so he assumed whoever wanted to meet him knew him and would reach out. However, it was the suggestion of someone more captivating being present that troubled him the most. The message's sender possessed knowledge he lacked, leaving him feeling like he was being manipulated, yet he couldn't think of another way to unravel the mystery. Inside, he was in turmoil over the photograph. He had complete trust in her, and their bed life seemed satisfying, or so he believed. However, there was only one means for someone to acquire his wife's photo, and he was about to discover it in roughly 5 minutes. The prospect of this revelation filled him with dread. Stepping into the dimly lit pub, he scanned the unfamiliar surroundings, uncertain of its layout. Ahead lay a spacious dining area, while to the left stood a bar. Choosing a seat at the bar's end, he signaled the bartender, who had just finished serving a well-dressed patron, to take his order. He requested a draft and turned his gaze toward the dining room. A man, having placed his order, traversed the floor, heading toward a table occupied by cheerful individuals. And then he spotted what the message had hinted at. Alice sat at the table, graciously accepting a drink from a sharply dressed man, exuding charm in her little black dress and pearls. Meanwhile, he operated on autopilot. Approaching the table, he closed the distance to Alice, who, upon spotting him, transformed her open smile into a startled expression. Undeterred, Tom continued his stride, seizing the well-dressed man's hair with his left hand. Yanking it back forcefully, the man dropped his drinks and stumbled backward, crying out in pain as Tom pulled him past. Releasing his grip, Tom poised for a right punch, only to realize the man had retreated too swiftly, falling onto his rear before Tom could engage. "Don't bother getting up, Pete," Tom cautioned. Pete, now disheveled and drenched in spilled drinks, nodded silently, making no attempt to move or speak. Returning his gaze to Alice, Tom observed the table's solemn silence. Recognizing familiar faces, members of Alice's team who often gathered at their home, he pondered the peculiar loyalty to the team amidst betrayal, except for one individual. Someone present knew the truth and chose to divulge it. Briefly considering uncovering the informant's identity, he swiftly dismissed the idea as unworthy of pursuit. "I'm heading home. If there's any hope of salvaging our marriage, you'll come home now," she declared. Agreeing, she began to rise, but he motioned for her to pause. "Give me a moment to depart," he requested. Before leaving, he directed his attention to Betty Wilson, seated beside Bob Thornton. "Betty, Bill thinks you're in Boston too. Bob, is this what Hannah believes?" Their avoidance of eye contact and silence spoke volumes. Is the entire team involved with each other? He pondered. Regrettably, he knew that at least one of them was. The journey home was mechanical, and he was surprised to find himself in his driveway. Entering the house, he retrieved a beer from the refrigerator and settled into the living room. While familiar with Bill Wilson and Hannah Thornton, he didn't recognize the other two couples among the four present. Debating whether to contact Bob or Hannah, he realized he had little desire to engage in conversation and lacked pertinent information. However, considering Betty and Bob's deceit and the situation's gravity, he opted to send them a message. Just heard from Alice. The team's travel plans seem to have changed. Best call for updates. Now they were aware of a disruption and could choose whether to delve deeper. At least his conscience was clear. After about 20 minutes, he heard the garage door open, signaling Alice's arrival. Waiting in the living room, he watched as she entered, still clad in her little black dress, but minus her shoes and jewelry. Despite her composed demeanor, he sensed her readiness to speak as she settled onto the sofa opposite him. Remaining silent, he believed in the potency of silence in discussions, prepared to let it linger as long as necessary. But it didn't last long. Alice appeared on the verge of bursting. "It's not what you think," she began, only to be halted by his raised hand. "You have no clue what I think about what I witnessed tonight," Tom retorted. "I don't need a lengthy explanation. We're both engineers. We know there's no definitive answer to any question. Why is just a way to rationalize subpar outcomes, so I won't bother asking why. Let's start with something else. How much time? How many people? How frequently do our acquaintances know about this? Apart from those at the table, am I labeled as your betrayed man among our colleagues and friends?" "No, Tom, it's not like that," Alice countered. "We're a team. Our travel plans got disrupted, and instead of returning home and traveling again tomorrow, Pete suggested we stay in town to rest before the job starts. I didn't see the entire team there. Where was everyone else?" "Some decided to stay home an extra night and meet us at the airport tomorrow," she admitted. "But you chose to deceive me," he accused. "You seemed quite close to Pete. Is there something between the star engineer and the prodigy program manager that I should know about?" "Well, for starters, Pete is okay, and he persuaded Bradley's owners not to press charges," she stated, sounding positive. His eyes widened in sheer astonishment at her loyalty. "I couldn't care less about your boyfriend. If that fool hadn't stumbled, I would have given him a broken nose. And by the way, the verdict's still out," Tom remarked. "Let him press charges. I've already spent a night in jail. It doesn't intimidate me." "Fair point. This could serve as compelling evidence," he said, flashing a half-smile. "Do you love him?" Alice fell silent briefly, gathering her thoughts. "Yes." Her admission hung in the air, and silence once again filled the conversation, signaling potential trouble ahead. "He's not my boyfriend. Nothing at all happened. Yes, I should have informed you about the change in travel plans, but it seemed insignificant. Whether I was in town or in Boston, it made no difference. You weren't expecting me, and I was still committed to the team. All we did was have dinner before retiring to our rooms. There was no reason for you to react as you did. He merely brought drinks. You completely humiliated me in front of my team." Now in full defensive mode, she attempted to maintain composure and feign indifference. He retrieved his phone, brought up a message, and slid it across the coffee table to her. Judging by her expression, he knew she recalled the photo and the circumstances, realizing denial was futile. Without further delay, she began again. He picked up his phone, activated the voice recording app, and placed the phone in his shirt pocket. "Tom, our team..." She hesitated, searching for words. Ah, we're very close-knit in many respects, most of us, she continued. We have a small group that meets regularly. Bradley hosted us all. We were the ones shouldering the majority of the concerns in proposal preparation. You know how much time I invested in our proposal? I can't pinpoint when it began. It was sometime after Pete assumed leadership. We collaborated closely, and I was drawn to him. And it just happened, Alice confessed. Intentionality, he interjected. Lovemaking isn't spontaneous. First you undress. There are numerous conscious choices involved. We both understand that. So please, spare me. So, nearly 6 months, he answered his own query. That's when Pete secured the contract, correct? She nodded. Team, he resumed. All of you. He refrained from labeling the notion. I mean, are you all involved? She nodded once more. Yes, Pete believed it fostered trust and team cohesion. Is that how he persuaded everyone to initiate a company lovemaking team? Now you're being disrespectful. It's much deeper than that. I feel deeply connected to Pete and my team. More than ever. Alice's confidence surged. He sensed trouble brewing. Unfortunately, you'll witness some personnel changes in your team, Tom stated. What have you done? Alice gasped. Tom, if you tell anyone else, it'll cause further injury. Let them decide for themselves. We must accept it. Alice, I can't stay silent and be complicit. I favor Bob and Hannah. Actually, I prefer them over Betty and Bill, he remarked. I informed them that my travel plans appear to have shifted. How your friends respond to their spouses and how their spouses accept these responses is their choice. I can rest peacefully with my decision. Tom, we boast the most productive team in Cramerica Inc.'s history, she almost shouted at him. And you benefited too, sir. Just because we held team meetings on Wednesdays doesn't mean you missed out. I never excluded you. You always had access whenever you needed. So I was socializing with my team earlier, and you were unaware. Do you want to discuss that photo you showed me? She taunted. So, now just because you know, and just because your ego's bruised, you want to diminish everything my team and I have accomplished? Alice hissed, growing angrier by the moment. It excited me. Tom's heart rate surged as Alice continued to defend her team's actions. And he briefly entertained the thought of forgiving her during the ride home from Bradley's if this was just a one-time thing with Pete. That notion has long since perished. He didn't need to hear anymore. He didn't want to hear anymore. But she persisted. No, sir. We won't let you off the hook. You should text Bob and Hannah to let them know you heard from me. We're stuck in Atlanta but have flights booked for tomorrow morning. That's the story Betty and Bill will stick to, and you'll support them. Got it? She yelled. There's millions at stake in this deal, and your complaints mean nothing. Send the message, then we'll discuss our next steps. What's next? Tom yelled back. There is no next. Are you leaving now? You, your messed up team, and your leader Pete can carry on however you want. We're finished. I'll find a lawyer this week and settle everything. It's a straightforward 50 split. You keep your pension, I keep mine, Tom declared. Go. You have reservations in the city. Use them. Head to Boston and chalk up another big win for you and your team. Tom, please send those messages, Alice pleaded, her tone much softer now. If we lose Betty or Bill before the presentation, the company could lose millions, both for you and me. We could miss out on tens, maybe hundreds of thousands in commissions and bonuses. Just think of the possibilities with that money. Just us. Forget about this misunderstanding. Please, Tom, don't let baseless concerns about casual lovemaking ruin everything. Pete says I'm on track for CEO status. I just need to keep doing what we're doing for a few more years. Don't you want that for me? For us? Alice implored. Just leave. He barely managed to utter a word before a forceful blow struck his back, knocking the wind out of him, leaving him sprawled on the floor with a knee pressed into his back. Don't injure him, Alice interjected. At least, not too much, she added. So, the jury's still out on whether my nose was broken, huh? Pete remarked, leaning in beside me as I lay pinned. Tom suspected there must be a transmitter. Now I know whose side she's on. Let's see whose nose ends up broken. Pete grinned. Grab his damn phone and send these damn texts for him. We don't have time for this nonsense, someone instructed, hoisting him from the floor. Only one person. Tom feigned offense, causing the person behind him to exert considerable effort to lift him, providing valuable insight. His adversary was a weak office type, wheezing from the exertion of lifting Tom to his feet. After being used as a punching bag, Tom caught his breath and returned to the fray. Unlike Pete and his team of polished salesmen, Tom's team operated in the field with the 160th SOAR Detachment from Fort Campbell, California. Though they weren't on the same level, After working alongside the crews on test missions, they were invited to support the Pillsbury trials, under the tutelage of seasoned veterans who piloted aircrafts modified by Tom's team specifically for their needs. If these individuals showed up at your door, it signaled the end of your days on Earth. Tom and his team developed the equipment necessary to enter hotspots and, crucially, to extricate themselves from them. They took pride in their contributions, ensuring mission success and the safe return of all personnel. The members of the 160th and their formidable passengers deeply appreciated the hard work Tom's team invested in making their gear operational. Among them, Staff Sergeant Troy Baker was the most intimidating figure, renowned throughout his sphere. From vagrants to colonels, everyone accorded him the respect he earned by accompanying his men on missions worldwide. He was renowned for his steadfast commitment to never leaving anyone behind, a reputation solidified during the Columbia mission. Staff Sergeant Baker instructed the young lieutenant platoon leader to stick close. It was the lieutenant's maiden mission, and Staff Sergeant Baker thought he was handling it well for a rookie. When FARC rebels initiated gunfire and ambushed their team, they managed to fend them off. However, when he glanced back, he saw the lieutenant sprawled on the ground, bleeding from a head wound. "He's lost consciousness," the medic noted, assessing his vital signs. Baker knelt down, lifting him onto the fire carrier. "He's gone," the doctor reiterated. "Perhaps," Baker replied, "but he's still coming home with us." The medic regarded him as though he'd lost his mind. "We've got over 5 treks back to the landing site through thick forest. We'll be lucky to make it back in one piece. But hauling a dead guy? What's this guy thinking?" The seasoned sergeant intercepted his thoughts. "I'd do the same for you, Billy," he assured the medic. "Stay close in case I need you." Their exploits became legendary upon their return to base. As the helicopter touched down, the doctor awaited them. The medic informed the doctor of the lieutenant's condition. Nodding, the doctor extracted a flashlight with a pen from his pocket. The medic watched in astonishment as the dead lieutenant's pupils contracted under the beam of light. "Care to reconsider your diagnosis, doctor?" the doc queried the medic, hustling the revived lieutenant to the operating room. He was one of those timeless figures. He didn't talk much, but when he did, everyone listened. He was irreplaceable. In an age of mass production and disposability, he stood apart. He was crafted by hand, unique, and Tom and his team held a particular fascination with him. During the prolonged downtime between missions, the staff sergeant expressed his gratitude by imparting basic yet effective hand-to-hand combat techniques to Tom and the team. He advised the engineers to be prepared for unexpected situations. "I understand the biggest challenge you'll likely encounter is a jammed copier or a painful paper cut. But if you continue in this field, you might find yourself in interesting places. So if you ever happen to encounter the local inhabitants, you'll have some useful knowledge," Staff Sergeant Baker shared with the group. "Let's hope that a paper cut remains the worst obstacle you'll ever face." Tom regulated his breathing, subtly leaning against his captor to feign compliance. Recalling the combat techniques demonstrated by the senior sergeant, Tom reflected, "You might find yourself in situations where you can't do much but endure the blows. It's not ideal, but it happens. The key is to remember that even when you're struck, you still have the ability to fight back. You just need to outsmart your opponent." Tom applied this lesson, passive resistance sapping the strength of his solitary captor. "Give me the phone, Tom," Pete demanded, locking eyes with him. "Now that you know about my affair with your wife, you're just another feeble geek. Do as we say, and maybe you can still be with Alice when the team doesn't need her. Don't forget the luxuries her bonus can afford you. Perhaps Alice will even buy you a synthetic companion for those lonely moments." Tom remained silent as Pete relished in humiliating him by coercing compliance. "Where is it, Tom?" he inquired, noticing the outline of a phone in Tom's shirt pocket. "Ah, found it." He reached for it with his right hand. Tom forcefully withdrew his right heel, striking his captor's shin midway and pulling it down until it collided with his Gucci moccasin-clad toes. Flexing his arms, he broke free from the grip of his captor, eliciting a cry of pain as the captor tumbled beneath his weight, unable to support himself. Pete's eyes widened in recognition as Tom swiftly extended his right hand, executing a shoulder turn as the first sergeant had taught him, and delivered a powerful punch to the center of Pete's face with maximum force, feeling a bone fracture beneath his fist. A geyser of blood spurted from Pete's nose as he crumpled to the ground as if struck by an axe. Turning to identify his assailant, Tom discovered it was Bill lying on the floor, clutching his leg and whimpering, "I think you broke my leg." Tom forcefully stomped on Bill's foot, eliciting another cry of pain. That should erase any doubt, Tom retorted, pivoting to face Pete, who was attempting to rise to his knees, hands raised to his injured face. Leaning close, Tom whispered in Pete's ear, "Looks like you've got a broken nose, Pete, but I'm not willing to sacrifice for the team just yet," before delivering a firm blow to Pete's temple, causing him to slump back down. Adrenaline coursing through his veins, Tom scanned the living room for Alice. Suddenly, he felt a sharp blow to the middle of his back and the base of his neck, causing him to drop to one knee. Turning to confront the attack, he spotted Alice wielding a cast-iron frying pan. Her swing missed its mark, grazing Tom's side. Rising to his feet, Tom seized the frying pan. "Tom, we can still salvage this," Alice pleaded. "Think of the money you'll lose. I'll put an end to this extramarital affair. I'll stop them, I promise. Just you and me, like old times." Rubbing the back of his head with his left hand, he gazed at her, astonished by how swiftly she was metamorphosing from one version of Alice to another. For a moment, he likened her transformation to the alien creature in John Carpenter's The Thing, adapting to each new situation. He chuckled at the analogy. Interpreting his smile as tacit approval of her final plea, Alice approached Tom for a hug. He lowered his left hand from his neck to steady her. Then, after a brief pause, he raised his right hand and delivered a punch to her nose, not hard enough to render her unconscious, but sufficient to fracture a bone. Alice screamed and crumpled to the floor. "Doesn't it hurt?" Tom inquired. "Your eyes are watering, you can't see or breathe properly, and there's blood everywhere. It's quite effective," he remarked. "Why did you slap me?" Alice cried out. "Because I could," he retorted. His phone remained on, recording the events. Although not all the recordings favored him, he believed he had enough evidence to justify his actions. Recalling the advice of the staff sergeant, he surveyed the room. "Decide when to act and wait until the moment is right. But when you do act, do so decisively and persist until you're the only one left moving," he remembered. Except for Bill whimpering in the corner and Alice attempting to staunch the flow of blood from her nose, he was the only one in motion. "You've saved another ace," he thought. "Doesn't quite fit your profile, lover boy, and Mr. Bill will be fit for duty by Monday. Such rotten luck, missing out on those millions and hefty bonuses," Tom mused aloud. "I wonder what Art will have to say about all this," he pondered. Contemplating calling emergency, he hesitated, realizing that involving the police would preclude his opportunity to interrogate Alice. He approached her, where she sat with a dish towel pressed to her face. Kneeling beside her, Tom demonstrated how to pinch the bridge of her nose with her thumb and index finger. The rush of adrenaline waned, leaving him drained, and he slumped heavily into the chair across from Alice. Where did my wife go? The Alice he encountered daily seemed vastly different from the woman sitting before him, prompting him to ponder how thoroughly she had deceived him. "Was it worth it?" he inquired. Alice glanced at him and shook her head. "It could have been," she replied. "If only you'd agree. We were on the verge. After Monday, I'd be on my way to the executive suite. This setback will delay everything. I can rectify it, but it's a setback." "So, becoming vice president was your ultimate dream?" Tom queried. "What about us? Deception, lies. Will this persist?" "Tom, you're so naive. Pete saw this. He warned me that your rigid ethics and Boy Scout mentality would hinder my progress if I allowed them to. He urged me to break free from your influence and forge my own path to success." "Did he advise you before or after he took advantage of you?" Tom retorted. "You don't know the half of it," she spat. "I tried to adhere to your advice like a dutiful engineer, thinking it would enhance my career. You want to know what really works?" Tom remained silent. "Sometimes when someone's about to self-destruct, you just have to step aside." He continued recording. "Let me tell you, my dear husband, all your counsel didn't amount to much. I went above and beyond to ensure my assignments were completed punctually and within budget, only to receive a few, 'well done, girl.' It wasn't until Betty pulled me aside that I discovered what a woman truly needs to do to succeed. Believe me, leveraging lovemaking to climb the ladder works. And it's a whole lot easier and more enjoyable," she asserted. "So this happened before Peter came into the picture?" Tom queried. "Oh, for a clever engineer, you sure can be dense sometimes, Tom," she quipped. "It was at a Christmas party a year after I joined Crimerica when I first surrendered to Art and never looked back." "Wait, you're also sleeping with the boss? Art Vandally?" Tom exclaimed. "Yes, Tom, Art, Pete, Bill, and anyone else on the team who can advance my career. Even now, if you think you've covered all bases, we informed Art of our whereabouts when we headed here. Now he's rallying the rest of the team. They'll receive a fabricated story about our absence. They'll have to proceed without us. but I believe the extra effort we invested with their procurement managers will yield dividends. Do I really want to hear this? He pondered. What the heck, why not? Extra effort? Tom encouraged. You've always been proactive, Alice. It was so effortless that I hesitate to even call it effort, she chuckled. Reminds me of that old joke, you know? The worst lovemaking I ever had was still pretty good, she remarked. At the bidders conference, it was smooth sailing with the men, so we had to get a bit more creative with Brenda, the standout woman on the selection committee. It's amusing that I can even seduce a woman, but I had to enlist old Pete for a boost. And considering the assurances that we'll begin collaborating after sealing the deal, our selection committee appears flawless, she remarked. Then why all this? I mean, if everything's in a haze, why resort to such aggressive tactics? Tom inquired. It was Pete's notion. Foolish. I urged him to relax, assured him I'd return home, pacify you, and make it back in time for the flight. But he insisted on asserting dominance. Look where it's landed us. Instead of being the face of the winning team, I'm here with you. As I said, it's salvageable, but it'll set me back. You don't come so cheap, he countered. Perhaps not, Alice acknowledged, but I'd still soar. Well, you certainly won't be flying now, he retorted. Recalling Pete's apparent knowledge, he suspected Alice had a transmitter. Art, are you listening? I'll contact the authorities. I'm certain multiple felonies are involved, not to mention potential fraud. This is a federal contract, right? Tom posited rhetorically. Yes, the feds aren't exactly lenient with what you call extra efforts. I'm sure you've got top-notch attorneys and all that, but perhaps there's an alternative, he hinted, leaving it at that. Moments later, Alice's phone rang with the tune of Hail to the Chief. Art? She answered, putting it on speaker. Art's voice filled the room. Firstly, let me offer my apologies. Pete's actions were a blunder. I can assure you the board will address it firmly. Thank you, Art. Tom felt a weight lift. It's reassuring to see you and the board take assault and fraud seriously, Tom. These are grave allegations. Lawyers will profit, but nobody wants to disrupt the status quo. We can pay the fines, Pete and Bill can do community service, but ultimately, you'll end up divorced and half as wealthy, Art explained matter-of-factly. Is there an or in this scenario, Art? Tom queried. Alice always claimed you were the sharper of the two. Yet, I'm increasingly grateful I brought Alice aboard. Indeed, Tom, there's certainly an or here, Art confirmed. We, Kremericki, supplanted you in your wife's affections, and when you confronted the issue, the response was utterly shameless. Appalling. Tom grasped the situation. Tom, Art continued, instead of involving law enforcement, as you suggested, we could reach a resolution. I've just sent a photo to Alice's phone. Well, not myself, but one of my technicians. They assured me it vanishes post-viewing. Take a look. Perhaps this will mend some fences, Alice. She presented the image to Tom. It displayed Bank of Grand Cayman and a figure with numerous zeros. And when will this come into play? Tom inquired. It's already in play, Tom. You've received an email with your account details. It's been a rough day for you, Tom. I understand if emotions cloud your judgment. Alice is deceitful, no doubt. But feelings don't count at the bank, correct? They just don't. Tom concurred, mimicking Art's tone. Kremericki will cover your divorce expenses. Reconciliation is off the table. It's evident Alice will pursue her share. She'll claim her personal effects and pension. He pondered momentarily before responding. On one hand, he could take a moral stance, expose the entire unsavory affair, and let the chips fall where they may. On the other, he could simply walk away. Art had just given him 5 million reasons to consider the latter. Does Kremericki have medical staff, Art? Tom inquired. Oh, certainly, Tom. We've got a few doctors on hand, Art responded. All right, said Tom. Better get a couple of them into the limo and send them over here for your team. So, we're in agreement? Art sought confirmation. Regarding Alice, Tom clarified. Precisely, Art concurred. Is that all, Tom? Farewell, Art, Tom stated, concluding the conversation. Tom retrieved his phone, deactivated the recording app, and returned it to his pocket. I knew you'd see things our way, Tom. We can still be pals, maybe with benefits once this is all over, she suggested, flashing what she thought was her most charming smile. But even her bright grin couldn't mask the impact of her battered nose. Her eyes darkened, blood crusted beneath her nostrils, and dried droplets hung from her chin. Tom found the scene almost amusing and allowed himself a smile. Once again, Alice misunderstood his expression as agreement and leaned in for a kiss. Tom extended his right hand to halt her, then grasped her face and pushed her back until she crashed onto the sofa. Either I slap you too hard or not hard enough. Why would I ever want to kiss you, Alice? She looked up at him, offended. Take whatever you want, but don't be here tomorrow, Tom instructed, heading for the door. He paused beside Bill. Still hurting, huh? He asked. Yeah, damn it, you idiot. It's still eliminating me, Bill complained. Maybe this will take your mind off it, Tom remarked, delivering a swift kick to Bill's groin. Bill doubled over, groaning in pain. Tom got into his car, unsure of his destination, but food and shelter were high on his list of priorities. With that in mind, he grabbed a burger at a nearby cafe and checked into the Red Roof Inn just outside the city, near the highway, falling asleep as soon as his head hit the pillow. Despite enduring the residual soreness from countless, well, at least 100 assorted injuries inflicted upon his body, he rose early in the morning and reluctantly hauled his aching frame out of bed. While brewing coffee in his motel room, his phone chimed, prompting him to reach for it. It was a message from that familiar number. Without delay, he opened it. Apologies for yesterday. Let's meet at the mall around noon. I'll be waiting for you at the bar, the message read. He composed a reply and poured tepid brown liquid from the coffee maker carafe into a paper cup. Yes, I'll be there, he mused, setting up his laptop. It was time to delve into online banking. Back in college, long before encountering Alice, Tom had a professor in economics who advocated for having at least one offshore account as a safety net. With nothing to lose and with the professor's guidance, he swiftly acquired a brand new bank account in the Cayman Islands. He dubbed it his Love You Foundation. Opening the account a decade ago, he diligently contributed whenever possible, amassing around $50,000 in savings. Now, his Love You Foundation was about to receive a significant injection. Tom logged into each bank's secure website with practiced ease, executing transfers from Cramerica's payment into his personal account. He retained $100,000 in the original account. After showering, changing into fresh attire, he readied himself to rendezvous with the enigmatic sender of the message. Arriving just after noon, he spotted a man who gestured in his direction. Around his age, the man appeared suave and well-groomed. Tom approached him. I believe you messaged me, he stated, taking a seat. I regret how things unfolded. Finding the right way to tell you wasn't easy, the stranger began. Why don't you introduce yourself and explain your connection to Alice, Tom countered. I used to be on her team. After 8 years in the Army, I left due to injuries sustained in battle. Cramerica hired me about 6 months ago, and I joined Pete's team 3 months back. Mentioned working for Alice to a friend, and when he asked for her full name, we discovered a mutual friend. He asked me to watch out for Alice as a favor. Initially, everything was fine. I was warmly welcomed by the team, though the reasons weren't immediately clear, he explained. Around 2 months later, Alice approached me. She's attractive and, well, persuasive. But when I inquired about the ring, she simply smiled and said, It's okay with you. I didn't agree and made that clear. That's when things turned cold. I started getting the worst assignments and nothing but grief from Pete. I reached out to our mutual friend again, informing him of Alice's advances. He suspected there was more to the story and felt you should know. Pete sent me a photo of them, attempting to entice me onto the team with a reward if I accepted. Let's just say I don't approve of their tactics. I consider myself honest. I quit yesterday and reached out to you, he disclosed. Our friend mentioned Tom Troy Baker. If it weren't for Troy, he replied, pausing briefly before continuing, let's just say he bailed me out of a tight spot when I was a rookie lieutenant. I owe him a few favors. We both do, Tom concurred. What's your plan? The stranger inquired. Art pretty much laid it out for me. I could involve the authorities, and yes, Bill, Pete, and even Alice would face legal repercussions. But with his legal team, it would likely end in nothing. We reached an agreement. You might view this as a compromise, and perhaps to some degree you're correct. But they took the only thing I couldn't replace. If I can't hold them legally accountable, I'll find another way to make them pay. It won't bring Alice back, but I may realize she's less indispensable than I believed. I've got a trip planned. Please pass on my gratitude to Troy for everything. I won't be returning to work, he stated. And you? Tom inquired. Well, Troy always praised Baxter Inc. Now that you're gone, they might need another engineer. You'll find they have a different approach at Baxter. You might prefer it. The work is challenging, but the perks don't compare to what Tony's team offered, he explained. Tom grinned. I think I can accept that. The stranger rose and Tom followed suit. They exchanged a simple nod and departed without further words. Come Monday, Tom was at the airport checking in for a flight to Costa Rica. Tamarindo seemed like a good place to unwind. Making his way toward security, he spotted a mailbox. Retrieving an envelope from his pocket addressed to the U.S. Department of Justice, Washington, D.C., he dropped it in. Inside was a flash drive containing a recording. Maybe they'll be interested. Who knows, he mused. Perhaps Art's lawyers aren't as formidable as he believes. With that, he proceeded to the security line. 9 months later, Tom found himself seated at his usual spot in a cafe. Anna, as charming as ever, brought him his beer. "Thanks, dear," he said, lifting the bottle to his lips. A piece of mail caught his attention. He held the envelope in his hands, devoid of a return address. He pondered who might have tracked him down. While he hadn't taken elaborate measures to conceal himself, locating him in a small town on the Pacific coast of northern Costa Rica would require resources beyond the norm. His initial suspicion was that Art's associates had located him. He left the envelope untouched for 2 days, cautious, but certain it wasn't a bomb. "Carlos," Tom called out to the cafe owner, "do you have a knife?" "Sigh, Mr. Tom," Carlos replied. Tom handed him the envelope and stepped back cautiously. "You can never be too careful," he reminded himself as Carlos opened it. Carlos passed the contents to Tom, who thanked him. Taking another sip of his beer, he turned over the envelope. Several sheets of paper slid onto the table, including a note that simply read, "Thought you might be interested," with a telephone number instead of a signature. The same number. Troy would have the means to locate him, Tom surmised. I can live with that. He flipped through another sheet, revealing a newspaper article with a photograph. The image depicted Pete, Bill, Alice, and Betty being escorted out of the Cromerica building in handcuffs. The headline proclaimed, "4 accused of multi-million-dollar procurement fraud." Tom couldn't help but smile. Maybe Art's legal team isn't as formidable as he presumed, he mused, a habit he'd picked up due to his limited Spanish and a fondness for hearing English spoken, even if it was only by himself. "Anna, another beer, please," he requested, extending his empty bottle. "Sure thing, Mr. Tom," Anna replied. "Thank you, Anna," he acknowledged, taking a sip and gazing out at the vast expanse of the deep blue Pacific Ocean.